Okay, I am supposed to talk about and will effective communication skills as part of mediation, which is in tab 3, the very first page. You'll see some bullet points. So what I'm going to talk about to begin with just before lunch, and we will be having lunch in a short while, and then I will finish it after lunch, is active listening, acknowledging emotions, effective questioning, summarizing, neutralizing language, reframing, with maybe a couple other points thrown in, such as silence and some other communication techniques. Before I do that, let me tell you a little bit more about who I am, so you know. I had the opportunity to listen in the back of the room to find out who all of you are. And this is the favorite part for me of being executive director here at the center, is really volunteers, and hopefully most of you will become volunteers, because that relationship with the volunteers is something that really makes my job wonderful, and all the different backgrounds and the different personalities is great. So I'm personally looking forward to doing everything we can in this training to help you become a volunteer here. And Paula, earlier you asked a question about how long volunteers are here. I would actually stretch that. I think a lot of the volunteers have been here for years. And in recent years, what has happened very recently is a lot more people are coming to the center because they want a career in it. Unfortunately, we had the experience of a few people taking advantage of essentially a free training and then not doing the volunteer work. And so we added the little signing of the information, which was to really make that commitment. But from our standpoint, we really want everybody to be a volunteer for a very long time. And so we put the 18 months down as a minimum, and twice a month is important because of the continuing education component of it. But after those 18 months, we really want everyone to volunteer, if they're able to, once a month at least, for as long as they can. So that's an important part. I started as a volunteer, so that's another reason why I'm pretty partial to volunteers. So I was a volunteer here for a couple years, and then they created a new position, which was a director of training position. And the idea was to do more trainings actually for money, to help support the center. As a not-for-profit organization, we're typical in the sense that we're always struggling for money because of all the work that we do for free. And so we were looking, there seemed to be a great demand of people who wanted to be trained but did not necessarily want to be volunteers. And so we started up that program. And so now we have a training that we charge individuals for, which is $800. So this training essentially is an $800 to $1,000 training. And those are always full. And we do a lot of specifically designed trainings for different groups. And then in September of '97, our executive director had resigned, and I became the new executive director. I also have moonlighted for many years with a large dispute resolution organization called JAMS. It was JAMS End Dispute. Before that, it was End Dispute in Chicago. It's a very large national organization with a lot of actually retired judges and some attorneys. Nowadays, they don't have very many non-attorneys on it, but it's handling civil litigation matters ranging from personal injury cases, business disputes, employment, construction, almost anything now. So with my mediations at the center and what I've done with them, and they pay me to do that, so that's also fun. I've been involved in very small claims court cases, the eviction court cases we do here, small personal injury cases over there, to very large complex construction cases with actually 44 named litigants in one case and 26 named litigants in another, so dealing with like over 100 people in a mediation session. So I have some background in different areas. And as you go through the training, all the different trainers you're going to see during the course of the training all have different backgrounds, and I encourage you when you have a chance, some of you are interested in family, and there'll be some people here that specialize in that, some people that will be coming in specialize in labor, and I encourage you to tap into some of their knowledge and different ways of working. And the final thing that I spend a lot of time on outside of my family is teaching alternative dispute resolution at Chicago College of Law. So I teach a course there and talk about not just mediation, but negotiation and arbitration and mini trials and summary jury trials. There's a whole slew of different techniques that many people are using to resolve disputes. So that's a little bit more background as far as I'm concerned. And what we want to do now is switch from kind of the introductory portion of today to getting very specific with skills. So I'm going to talk about the communication skills. I believe Andy later on will be talking about the negotiation skills and mediation strategies. At the end of the day, we'll pull it all together and come back and talk about the mediation process. When Judith talked about it, Margaret made it look easy. What that really is process and skills. The process itself is built to help you do much of the work for the parties. And then you combine that with the skills and you're a mediator. If you didn't have the process and just the skills, it really wouldn't be a mediation. And you usually don't have an aha experience in a mediation. You try all these different skills as you move through the process. You don't necessarily know what's working, but at some point something does, and you don't need to know. And they may never tell you, but at some point there's been some movement on their part. And that's part of the mediation process. So from now on, we're going to isolate today just certain skills to make sure we're on the same page in speaking of language, so that when you're in your practice simulations, which will be most of the training after today, you'll be familiar with the language that the trainers will be using. And a lot, especially from listening to all your backgrounds and your introductions, a lot of the material I'm going to cover is pretty elementary. So I don't imagine there'll be very little that will be new, but we want to cover it, and you want to be thinking about how you would use it in the mediation sessions, in particular based on the video that you have seen. But because of that, the way I would like to begin is I want to start to talk about listening skills, but instead of just lecturing on listening skills, what I like to do is have someone volunteer. You can stay in your seat, but what I'd like to do is pretend I'm your boss and have you basically knocking on my door. Again, you can stay in your seat. I'm at my desk working, and I would like you to complain about something. Something's really bugging you about me or about the work. And I'd like you to complain about it. And then that will just last for a real brief time. I'd like the rest of you just to observe, and afterward we'll talk about it. So who wants to be did you want to be a complainer? Okay, you bet you'll be the complainer. So I'm hard at work, and we'll just improv. Yeah.
I need to speak with you. I'm just so tired of Ms. Jones next door has her kids running wild. They're always in the hall. They tear up the bathroom. Are you listening to me?
Yeah, I'm hearing, but I'm really busy right now, so I think you should just go talk to Ms. Jones.
I have tried speaking with her, and what I would appreciate is if you could we could schedule a time where Ms. Jones and I could both come in, and you can help us to resolve this.
I got a lot to do. I suggest you try to work it out with her if you want to be able to work here.
Okay, thank you.
That was fast. Let's try this again one more time. So we're going to just put what just happened. We'll put that on the side, and we'll come back and talk about it. So as if that didn't take place, Yvette, let's just start over. I'm at my desk, and you can complain about the same thing. Yes, hi, Yvette.
Hi. I wonder if I'm really having some difficulty with some of the, with Ms. Jones, who's a teacher. I've tried speaking with her about some of the problems that's happening in the hallways and in the bathrooms with her students that she lets go unaccompanied, and some of these kids really need more supervision, and she's unwilling to offer that, and I'm at wit's end. I've tried speaking with her.
Okay.
I've offered suggestions, I've asked her how I might help, and she's just very close to any discussion about it.
Okay, so you're having some difficulty with how Ms. Jones is handling her classes or her students, and it's interfering with what you're doing. Is that what you're saying? Okay. I'm in the middle of a report I have to get done, so maybe you could tell me a little bit more about it, and then maybe we'll have to talk a little bit later. I don't know, but why don't you come in and tell me a little bit more about what's happening?
Right now?
Yeah, go ahead. Just so I have a feel for it, and then maybe we'll set up a time for something later.
Well, you know that the morning from 9 to 10:30 is reading time in school and language arts. And we really need to have a calm atmosphere, and as I understood it, we agreed in our faculty meeting that everyone would be responsible for their own students and that everyone would be accounted for. And almost daily for the past couple weeks, I've had to interrupt my class to go out to find out what the commotion is in the hall. There's been yelling coming from the bathroom. I've had to go in there to see what's going on, and each time there are students from Ms. Jones' class. And there's been a lot of vandalism in there. I haven't brought it to you before because I'm trying to address it with her directly.
Okay.
And
so it's during this reading period that it's been really distracting, and vandalism, a lot of things taking place that you don't think should, and you've actually tried speaking with her before? And what's happened?
She's unwilling. She says it's not her responsibility. She can't deal with these particular kids. She thinks I'm,
okay, let's stop. You don't have to make up anymore, unless that's a real story. It might be. Thanks. So observations. What did you observe between the first time and the second time in terms of listening skills? We're just focusing on listening skills.
Summarize.
Okay.
Did I hear you say?
Okay.
Eye contact.
Okay. Eye contact. And I'm going to put with summarize, restate.
There's a body language too. You nodded and
Active listening.
yeah, you were nodding and actively involved. You could tell you were involved with what she was saying.
You gave credence to what her issue was, where it seemed the first time you just didn't really care about her issue at all.
Okay. How did I do that?
Well, first of all, you stopped what
Okay.
you were doing.
Okay. So I'm just going to put up non-distraction, or that's part of the environment. Okay. Anything else?
You showed interest.
How did I show the interest?
The way you followed up with the questions and looking at her and your demeanor.
Okay. And the questions, what type of questions?
Clarification.
Okay, so partially clarification. What else?
Open-ended.
Good. Open-ended. In fact, the second time, the first question I asked was open, and Yvette could have gone on for a long time. In fact, I may have actually interrupted at some point to restate it. I don't know, or one of the times I may have. Any other thought on the questions that I was asking in terms of anything else about them?
They were focused on her perception of the situation,
Okay.
not anything that you were bringing to it.
Okay, good, yeah.
You seem very curious about it, genuinely curious about
Okay.
what happened.
Good, and I think that gets into demeanor and presence as well. And one thing I would say that maybe it's too obvious, but they were non-judgmental. And the first time I was very judgmental. I don't know that I even asked a question, but many times, most of us, in fact, when we're listening to a story, if we're not focused on doing something different, we're making judgments in our own head. Even if we don't ask a judgmental question, we are. But a lot of times that will come out in the questions and how we act. So it's very non-judgmental. And I would say many times, if we've, depending on who we've had as managers or supervisors, we might have found a lot of them being very judgmental when we're trying to talk with them. And sometimes it's a matter of major time constraints and trying to get work done that the manager doesn't have time necessarily to deal with some situations. Anything else that you observed between the first time and the second time? Any other differences? Yeah, Peter.
Basically, you showed respect the second time.
first time, it's just like, go away, don't bother me, and the second time, come in and listen, you know.
Okay. So that was actually in the content, probably. I mean, it was all this nonverbal stuff, or what were you thinking?
Well, first that you invited her in, and,
Okay.
I mean, and the whole business about not looking up from your work the first time, and just essentially saying, I don't have time for you.
Right. And to some degree, I was much shorter the first time, but I was also saying I didn't have that much time, but let me hear a little bit now. And it may have resulted in, right when I stopped it after you were done, saying, okay, this sounds like a long problem, we'll have to set up a time to talk about it later. And am I going to, is there going to be a different result at the end of the second time versus the first? Do we know?
Probably. More than likely.
Okay. Anybody not sure? I mean, I don't know. There may not be. It may be that I say, well, you know what? You really need to work this out on your own. But, and this was extremely artificial, granted. I don't know if there was enough time in this, but did you, even though it was a role play, did you actually have the sense of feeling differently the first or second?
Absolutely. The first time I felt totally dismissed, and that's why I just said, well,
You just
okay.
walked away, right?
Because I thought, well, I've got to deal with this myself. He's going to be no help. There's no point in even taking this any further.
Okay.
And the second time, whatever, I don't know if you would have helped resolve it, but at least I felt like I had a place to be heard,
Right.
to vent, to kind of rethink myself what I might do. Because you asked those clarifying questions. What have I done? You know, what's happening? It helped me to think through. For the first time, it was just like,
Okay. And we had only spent a minute
no
or
way.
two, so.
Yeah.
So you were also, it seemed more willing to, just based on those, some of the active listening that we're talking about, to share information with me. Whereas the first time, it was, I kind of cut you off and, okay.
Yeah, I felt more validated the second time.
Okay, good. And that's one thing to remember when you're a mediator, that parties may not resolve it, they may not reach an agreement, but you have provided excellent service for them in the sense that they've been able to sit down and talk about it, at least tell their story. I mean, the way our process is built, they'll have the chance to tell their story, each one, fairly uninterrupted during during our initial statement phase of the process. And many times it helps clarify things for people. I mean, it may clarify the fact that, no, I'm not going to reach an agreement with this person, I want to go to court or I want to do this, but we've helped them, even though it hasn't reached an agreement. Maria?
And the second time, you introduced a next step. So you introduced a little bit of process. Maybe we won't get it all done here, but there's the next phase we can move to, which is you coming back when we both have more time.
Good, right. Which is, and that's where I kind of put under the non-distraction or the environment, but the whole setting the stage, the whole time is important. And most of the conflicts that we get are not at the time of the fight or whatever's taking place. We schedule an appointment and it's a couple weeks later. And so that makes a big difference. And it will be an environment where the mediator has time. Hopefully the parties have set aside some time, although that doesn't always happen. And so there's a place for it, which doesn't mean, again, it can't happen anywhere. It does, but that's one of the things we work on. Yes?
You made her feel good about herself. The first time you were in effect saying, well, this is stupid, go take care of it. The second time you were showing sufficient interest that she had to feel, well, he sees this as a legitimate subject, whether or not it gets resolved, and he's willing to talk about it.
Okay, good. And so instead of having lectured on all these things, you know all these communication and active listening skills, was just to do a little demonstration to show it in place and how it really can have a major effect. And when you're mediating, if you lose some of your impartiality to both the outcome or the parties, how your communication skills will be affected. I have been mediating a long time and have mediated hundreds of cases. My wife's never seen me, and she cannot believe I'm a mediator. Okay, so, and she's told me this on more than one occasion, and there's a good reason for it. When I mediate, one, I usually don't know the parties, and I prepare myself, and I'm I really don't care. I mean, I'm in a frame of mind that I don't care what happens to the case. It's going to be up to them. It's very liberating once you get used to that. And I'm very, very good, if I don't say so myself, at mediating using all these skills. But I'm personally involved with my wife, I hope I am, and I tend to react. My natural inclination, even after using all these skills for so many years, is to react. And she knows me well enough that she may do something to make me react, and vice versa. When she tells me that, I do remember some of these skills, and so I make a conscious point of pausing, and actually pause in your personal interrelationships. Just the pause is a dramatic help. And I remember to use some of these active listening skills and some of the mediation skills. But my wife knows me so well that she then says, don't mediate me. So she's kind of a no-win situation. And then I have to go to, as Andy likes to say, mediation 102 or 202 or 302. So I have used some of the skills, and it's without her knowing it, and it's worked really, really well. But I say that because to just help you, I mean, it is very difficult, and it's going to be difficult not today, but tomorrow and the rest of the training when you jump in the middle of emotionally charged parties. But at least you're not involved with it. And the minute you start getting involved with it, it will really become hard. So you need to free yourself of that. So that's an important part.
Is there any trick to that?
Oh, is there a trick to it? There is no shortcut trick to that. The trick of that really needs to be found individually for each person. A lot of our training, by the way, is an unlearning. In listening to all your backgrounds, you have different backgrounds, and people from the social work or therapy fields will bring certain excellent skills, but then need to unlearn some of that because we're not performing therapy here, and may need to work on some of the other aspects of it. A person like yourself, who's used to, as you said in your introduction, or when you were introduced, is used to making decisions for people. That may be very hard when you start listening to people that you're ready to make judgment. So you'll need to unlearn that. On the other hand, you're probably going to be very skilled at asking reality testing questions in BATNA later on. So there's pros and cons. And part of the training and part of the uncomfortableness when you get into the simulations will be being very conscious of a new process with these skills, and you'll just need to work with it. And I'll just say right now, you should expect to feel very uncomfortable when you practice tomorrow, and that's okay, because we expect that. And each time you do it, you'll feel a little more comfortable, and sometimes you have to go different. One person will tell you to intervene more, and then the next practice session you will do that, and the person, oh, you're jumping in way too much, and hopefully by the third time you get it right. So that's part of the process. For me, it is knowing that this is their problem. They need to take ownership of it, and I'm here to help them have that discussion. But I'm simply here as almost their guest to assist them in their negotiation. And for me, just to remember that helps me do that. And once you get that mentality, it's very freeing. I'm still going to do my best. If they want to reach an agreement, I'm going to be persistent, I'm going to be patient, I'm going to do all this, and I can get them there if that's what they want. But I'm not going to do it for them. Let's go to let's skip, let's go to 3-4. So skip a couple pages to the active listening skill cluster page. Because I just want to highlight, this is one way of looking at communication skills and active listening. Pretty much had these clusters up on the board. The attending skills, following skills, and reflecting skills are all part of active listening. So the attending skills, you talked about the presence, the posture of involvement, that's part of it. Appropriate body motion, again, that's to show the interest, show the presence. What would be inappropriate would be actually touching someone. I mean, you might do a handshake at the beginning. Many times in our situations, I don't need to even do that. But when I talk to people in the office or people I'm friends with, as part of my natural communication skill, I will touch them, and that's something I do. Some people don't. But in a mediation, that would not be good. You don't know if that's going to be appropriate or not. So it's those type of things to remember. Eye contact. Everyone mentioned the difference when I was working with the vet about eye contact versus no eye contact. So that can be very powerful and important. The thing to remember about it, and there's several people in here who are more experts than we are on multicultural situations, but to be aware of different cultures or it doesn't even have to be cultures, just different individuals where direct eye contact may not be the correct route to go. So you just want to be aware of individuals and having different presence that different things may work. So usually eye contact will be very powerful, but not always. And I already talked about the non-distracting environment. Those are all part of attending skills. The following skills, door openers are, what happened next, go on, some of that phrasing that just keeps the person talking. Minimal encouragers are the nodding, okay. Again, just those little subtle things that can make a big difference. Again, the infrequent questions. So you don't want to jump in with someone and take over with your questions, which is easy to do. For some of us, we're trained to do just that. If we're investigating, we're there, we got control, we're asking question after question. When you're in the listening mode, and we're just focused now on the listening side of things, a few questions, and as we said, non-judgmental, probably open questions. And then attentive silence. I'm divulging all my weaknesses today. One of my other weaknesses has been impatience, actually, where someone may be going on or they're a little bit slow to tell me what's going on, and I get a pretty good feel how I could finish their sentence for them, so I tended to do that sometimes. A trainer may call that overlapping on someone else or finishing their sentence. That's something you really want to try to avoid. You ask a question, and a lot of the questions you're going to be asking, people really need to think about. And so you pause, you're just silent. Let them finish. No need to explain further unless they ask for further explanation. Give them that time and that space. So that's one aspect of silence. I'd like to talk for one moment about the real proactive way of using silence. That was one proactive way of using silence, is to get the parties talking. And if you recall in the video, if you had a chance to see it all, Margaret caucuses with each side, then she brings them back together, what we would call crosstalk 2. She actually asks a question, and no one says anything for about 13 seconds, but they do. And most of our mediators feel we can out-silence our parties all the time. And so that is a technique that you may purposely use. It's not necessarily something that you use all the time, but you may just be silent because most of the time, and again, there's cultural differences here, but many of the people that we see will want to fill that. And one of the things we want to see happen here is to have the parties doing the work as much as possible. If the parties aren't doing a lot of work, we'll jump in there and do it, but the more they can have the conversation and the more they can talk together, the better. So it's just something to keep in mind. More on the reflecting skills, someone mentioned summarize, and then I put up restating, and another word for that might be reflecting, and all these on here, paraphrasing, etc. If you turn one page over, there's also a few additional ones, which we also had up here, clarifying, encouraging, validating. I think almost all those were mentioned. In a mediation, you will, as part of the mediation process, and at the end of the day, you'll hear more about it, but during the party's initial statement, it's going to be mandatory for you to summarize what they've said. And that's usually a very full summary. So when we talk about summarizing, we're usually referring to kind of a big summarization of what someone said, or if it's in the middle of crosstalk, what both parties have said, and not just on the facts, but on the emotional side as well. So that would be what we talk about in terms of summarization. Restating would be more what I felt I was actually doing with you, Yvette. I mean, it might have started to get a little bit larger, but I was kind of just restating back what you were saying back to you. And in a mediation, a lot of times we like to say, when in doubt, summarize or restate. It's rare that we have a mediator that summarizes too much. It has happened, but very rare. So even though you're going to be asking questions most of the time as the mediator, you want to be filling in between your questions with a lot of restating. Because